In the 60s, it was acid. In the 80s, it was cocaine. In the 90s, it was chronic. And these days, it's Sizzurup and Molly, Shannon.
Very interesting. Here to break down why drugs have ruled the music industry is Dr. Aletha Maybank.
Hello.
Hello.
Dr. Aletha, why does it seem like drugs and the music industry go hand in hand?
Well, that's a good question. So if you think about artists and you talk about artists and you talk to artists, they say one of the reasons why they do drugs because it helps their creativity. And this is really not new to, the 60s or 70s. This has been, since beyond time, way past when we were born, before we were born.
Okay.
But there's been, a movement over the years where you see it more and more and more. And if we go to Jimi Hendrix, we go to
Janis Joplin,
yes, the Beatles,
the Beatles,
they will all say that this particular drug or whatever drug of choice that they had created some level of creativity. Now, I wouldn't say it's hand in hand in the sense that it's the rule. We know many artists who have not done drugs and are completely fine or completely good and have great music that's out there. But there is definitely a culture. There's a lot of access. I think they are protected in a way, and so they're not as prone to get in trouble if there are any legal issues or things of that nature. There are a lot of people just giving them drugs, and they're just present everywhere.
I know that when I was coming up in college, it was all about the Chronic. And
Yes.
Dr. Dre, that was the reigning album, and everybody had their little cannabis leaf on their wall, et cetera, et cetera. But now it seems in rap music it's all about Molly or MDMA. Jay-Z, Rick Ross, Madonna, they all reference it in lyrics. Why are today's artists so infatuated with Molly?
Right. Well,
and what is Molly?
And what
exactly?
is Molly? Right.
Yeah.
Well, Molly actually is, the precursor of Molly is ecstasy.
Okay.
And really, Molly, and it's given this name Molly as if she's pure.
Right.
It's supposed to be this purer form of Molly, which really isn't true.
Sounds so innocent.
It sounds
but
so
it's
innocent,
not.
but it's really not. And it's a powder form. It's a crystal form of ecstasy.
Okay.
The challenge with Molly, as with ecstasy, the same thing, is that Molly, though, is mixed, and you don't know what it's going to be mixed with. So when it's sold to the individual, it can be mixed with all kinds of products, bath salts, whatever it is. And we've had several deaths lately of young people who have had these mixtures that have died not really from the Molly itself, but really from this mixture, from whatever else was in there. And that's really the danger of it. Molly itself also can cause hyperthermia, which is elevated fever, high temperatures, and really dehydration. So when they're at the parties, and Molly's really associated, as well as ecstasy, with rave parties or parties and feeling this great sense of euphoria and being happy, and that's what you hear about when people are taking Molly. It actually increases your serotonin levels, which are what make you happy. It's your love, your sexual kind of neurotransmitters in your body.
Oh,
and so it heightens that. And so in that heightened sense, many people feel good about themselves. They're partying. They're actually, the other risk is, with sexual behaviors potentially that are happening that they're not protecting.
Uninhibited.
Exactly.
Yes.
They're not protecting themselves. So there are many other side effects from Molly that aren't really direct as well.
What are some of the unforeseen side effects that people may not be realizing? Because I know Trinidad James talked about pop the Molly, now I'm sweating. So besides the high temperatures, the feelings of being happy, what are the side effects we don't see?
The side effects that you don't see potentially, again, is that hyperthermia part and the dehydration piece of it. But the other piece that people don't realize is that because there's such a high, the low, once you start to come off of Molly, can feel really low. And if you're a person who already is depressed or has some other kind of mental issues, that low can be pretty bad to the point of further depression, potentially suicide, and we've heard stories and cases of that.
Wow.
Really? So you can crash pretty hard.
You can crash pretty hard. And then what happens is that people then use more Molly in order to keep that feeling from coming.
Now, you
and it becomes
mentioned
a cycle.
ecstasy before. How does Molly differ from ecstasy? Because, again, in the 90s, Biggie, Ja Rule, even Jay-Z, Eminem, they were all rhyming about ecstasy.
All rhyming about ecstasy.
Ecstasy. So how does it differ?
Really, the main difference is the form and how it is. So ecstasy is really in a pill form. Molly is the powder form and the crystal form. So it comes in kind of a capsule, but it's powder. And it can be mixed in a different kind of way. Considered to be purer, not really per se, but ecstasy is really just a pill form of Molly.
So how do they get Molly into their system? Is it a snorting thing?
No, Molly, you take it, you can swallow it. It's definitely in, like a capsule that you break apart and it can fall out, and all the powder can fall out. So it's, stashed or put together by a drug dealer, whomever is, putting it together, puts the powder into a little capsule, and then they're sold.
Now, is it true that originally it was a weight loss drug?
Yeah, so that's the ecstasy, actually, in the 1900s, Merck promoted it as a weight loss drug.
Really?
Really, as a weight loss drug. And then, over the years it wasn't used. And then it really resurged in Texas. A priest, Michael Clegg, he felt that this was the best therapeutic drug ever, was producing lots of ecstasy, something like 500,000 pills a month was giving away.
Wow.
And then it really picked up in the music industry in America, in LA a couple years later. And then from there, there's been this steady increase of ecstasy, as you just mentioned, all the musical artists that really have talked about it, have sung about it, have rapped about it, whatever it is, over the years. And then now, when you mentioned Trinidad James, he's really the one who brought Molly to the attention of the major media. And since then, you know, Rick Ross mentioned it, and there was a lot of scandal around that because of the potential of the date rape, you know.
Date rape drug, exactly.
Yeah.
But now it's also being possibly treated to treat PTSD. Is that true?
There are some studies and some scientists that are looking into what are some other the possible treatments or what Molly can be used for. Remember I said that it's a drug that, you know, it makes you feel happy, euphoric. It takes away that depressive feeling. And so, you know, post-traumatic stress disorder can make you feel that way, depressed. You know, you're traumatic, there's trauma that's happened, you're a little bit startled by things that are happening. So there are some studies to see if it works. But let me say that those studies are very preliminary.
Okay.
And there's a lot of work to be looked at with Molly. And they're not really clear as far as, you know, what are going to be the good effects, if there are going to be any therapeutic effects for Molly or not. So we still have a lot of research to do in that area.
Well, let's move on to Sizzurup, because this is supposed to be Lil Wayne's drug of choice. We see him with his goblet around all the time when he's on stage or what have you. But what exactly is it?
Okay, Sizzurup. Sizzurup, yes.
She said, okay, Sizzurup.
Let's break this down.
Let's break it down. What's the recipe for Sizzurup?
Exactly. So Sizzurup, cough medicine, right? So cough medicine, if you get it over the counter, typically has promethazine and dexamethasone.
Okay.
You don't have to have a prescription for it. Promethazine is a sedative, so it kind of makes you tired, it makes you sleepy, a sedative. And then if you get a prescription drug, so it's going to be promethazine and an opiate or codeine. And that mixture is really toxic. And so that one you have to get a prescription for. But the interesting thing is that it's actually legal because codeine can be prescribed by a doctor. And so where people can, so you can see people walking around with styrofoam cups with Sizzurup. So it's the mix of promethazine and codeine, then added to that cup, usually sometimes is a flavored soda, so whether it's grape, whatever the flavor is of their choice, a Jolly Rancher for further flavor, and that's about it. You can also add some alcohol if you choose, but that's really the general mix of what Sizzurup is.
Well, that sounds lethal, and people apparently have already died from Sizzurup.
They have
overdoses.
Absolutely, and there's quotes of saying it's like drinking liquid heroin. It's an opiate, and so you know any opiate, you know, it's a painkiller, and it is addictive. It's highly addictive, and after a while, you will gain a dependency on using Sizzurup, and that's really the big danger of Sizzurup, because after a while, it makes, you know, if you talk to individuals, they'll say it gives them this really mellow feeling, not a happy euphoric feeling, but more just a mellow feeling,
chilled out,
just a very chilled out feeling that they can feel like they can cope with life and, you know, the stressors of life.
Well, you know, and I think that's one of the dangerous things of people like Lil Wayne, Drake, and Soulja Boy rapping about this, because it's actually accessible to younger people who may not be able to buy the other drugs. Do you think that's why it's becoming so popular? Well,
it's very accessible in a sense, and there's a huge market around it as far as obtaining those painkillers and obtaining the codeine. I mean, it's known, I mean, I'm a physician, but the healthcare system is somehow involved in it, and there's many stories of physicians actually setting up shop and providing, you know, these prescriptions to individuals so that they can get easy access to the drugs. And then they have what they call syrup houses in certain places, so it's just like the crack houses. They have syrup houses where you can go and get the mixtures as well. So there are many different ways in which this is accessible.
That's scary. Okay, the new drug that you say is on the rise, and I can't even believe this name, it's called Crocodile, but it's spelled with a K?
Crocodile, right.
2 Ks.
2 Ks.
Okay, so, and it eats your skin? Why would anybody take this drug?
So 10 years ago, this comes from Russia. And the United States has been watching this for a little while, since 2011. It's really been on their radars whether it's going to come to the States, because it really hadn't come to the States yet. But basically, it is a mixture of, again, an opiate, codeine, gasoline, hydrochloric acid, and potentially red phosphorus. So the reason why crocodile, because when you inject it into your veins, it makes your skin, you're putting acid in your veins. So it's basically injecting that into your skin it's going to burn your skin. It's going to explode your vessels. And what happens are people's skin starts to fall off. It becomes gangrenous and green. So they call it crocodile because of that.
Well, what feeling are they trying to evoke in their body that they would go to such extremes?
So it has that heroin type of feeling as well. And it's about the third less about the amount of heroin, however, 3 times the potency. It's cheaper than heroin. The amount of time that the high lasts is about 1.5 hours, so it's really pretty short as far as a drug goes. Heroin's typically about 4 to 6 hours, and so people are using it, you know, a lot. I'm going to come back if they're using it here in the United States, but people would tend to use it a lot because that high wears off pretty quickly. Now, in the United States, there's actually reports this week for the first time that potentially they're starting to see the use of the drug here in this country.
Wow.
And there are women who are in Illinois who actually said that they weren't even aware that the heroin that they bought, they're known heroin addicts, but they weren't aware that it was this mixture. But what they noticed, they went to the doctors and they had these scars on their body. And they showed pictures of them of how, you know, they took the medicine and how it created this situation. And you'll see pictures where the legs, skin's off them, wrapped in bandages. It's pretty, you know, it's pretty intense and pretty gruesome.
Wow.
And those who are using at this particular stage, they must be at a pretty bad point in their life in order to, yeah, exactly.
Wow, well, the lesson to learn today is don't mess up your skin, don't mess up your brain, just say no. Just say no.
Yeah. And stay away from the drugs.
Why can't people just sing about happy things?
Right.
Well, they're trying to.
And rhyme about happy things.
I know. I know.
All right, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you.
You're watching Arise Entertainment 360.